Previously, I had given benefit of the doubt to John Elway, in large part because he had built a contender in Denver. They won a Super Bowl. I felt like that earns you a little bit of a benefit of the doubt, especially when you not only led your team to 2 Super Bowl appearances and a world championship as a general manager, but as a player for that same organization, you went to 5 Super Bowls and won a couple of them at the end of your career. To me, that felt like that afforded John Elway a little bit of fan capital. That time is over. This 2018 season was another disappointment. You entered the season with Vance Joseph clinging on to his job. He was clearly on the hot seat and everybody knew it. It really felt like John Elway couldn't wait to fire him. It felt like he almost knew initially in 2017 he had made a mistake, but he didn't want to sit there and fire him after 1 year. He wanted to give him another chance, as Vance Joseph had deserved. But you always felt like this was an inevitability, that this team was not going to make the playoffs and Vance Joseph was going to be fired. You know, when you sit there before in the offseason, you trade away arguably your best defensive back and Aqib Talib, and you get a bag of peanuts in return, you have to wonder, hey, you know, there's one part that says sometimes addition by subtraction, especially from a locker room standpoint, but for a team that got a little old, that's lacking talent in some places, is it really a good idea to be trading away really, really good players? I don't know. And then you've got the trade mid-season of Demaryius Thomas, like change was afoot in Denver. You had the release before the season of Paxton Lynch, which is not Vance Joseph's fault. That is John Elway's fault for ever drafting him to begin with. Paxton Lynch was just a massive, massive bust. His most notable move in the offseason was the signing of Case Keenum. And look, Case Keenum's not a bum, but he's not very good either. What you saw out of him in Minnesota in 2017 was more an outlier than really representative of who he is as an NFL quarterback. Case Keenum is a less sexy version of Ryan Fitzpatrick. A guy that you can maybe have a couple of nice starts and a couple of wins with as a backup, but once teams catch on, the lack of overall true arm talent and abilities will start to catch up. Teams catch on, and you start to struggle. That's exactly what Case Keenum is. And I feel bad for Vance Joseph in some ways because you could point to some of the mistakes he made as a coach in 2018 and 2017, and they're surely valid. And that's not to say that he didn't deserve to ultimately be fired. I mean, he did have 2 years. I would like to see coaches typically, unless it's so egregious, get 3 to 4. I don't think Vance Joseph was so egregious that he deserved to be fired after 2, but nonetheless, that's the nature of the beast sometimes. But I do ask you this. For a guy the last 2 years whose quarterback situation revolved around the likes of Trevor Siemian, Brock Osweiler, and Case Keenum, what the fuck did you expect? John Elway, what the hell did you expect? How many coaches do you think could come into that situation with a defense that isn't as good as it once was, with an offense lacking in explosive skill talent on the outside, and with those quarterbacks? What the hell did you think was going to happen other than 5 to 7 wins? Like, seriously, what the hell's going on here? Well, I guess you can't fire John Elway. It's time to start considering it. Because you look at the offense. You know, the best player on that offense in 2018 was an undrafted rookie in Philip Lindsay. Now, he had over 1,000 yards rushing, and he was a real revelation coming out of Colorado. He should have been drafted to begin with, yes, but the Broncos really benefited from everybody else's mistakes, frankly, including their own. He was a stud as a rookie, and the Broncos now have their long-term answer at the running back position. Some of you might have thought it was going to be Royce Freeman. Years past, you would have thought it was Devontae Booker. It's freaking undrafted Philip Lindsay. It's crazy how the world works sometimes. This offense, though, still wasn't that good. Kind of middle of the road. 12th in rushing yards a game, 19th in passing yards a game, 20 in total yards per game. Philip Lindsay helped that offense quite a bit, but that offense still couldn't overcome the fact that Case Keenum is mediocre and the overall skill talent on the offense wasn't that great. But the bigger thing is defensively, for a Broncos team that in order to succeed, for Vance Joseph or anybody else as a head coach, is still based on the notion of playing top-level defense. They did anything but this past season. They were in the 20s against the run, against the pass, and total yards, and that's with Von Miller and Bradley Chubb combining for 26.5 sacks. So that defense got worse, and that offense was mediocre. As a result, what do you think is going to happen? The Broncos missed the playoffs again. It was earned. It was merited. And Vance Joseph being fired shouldn't have left John Elway off the hook. Most certainly shouldn't. Now, for the Broncos, they went out there and got their new head coach in Vic Fangio. And I got to tell you, if you are a Broncos fan, you would at least have to be excited about Vic Fangio and the work he could do with Von Miller and Bradley Chubb and his defense. Holy hell. There's a very good chance that Von Miller will be a finalist for NFL Defensive Player of the Year in 2019. Hell, if not, maybe Bradley Chubb. I promise you, you're going to enjoy Vic Fangio and the work he does on the defensive side of the ball. What he does in terms of his offensive staff and in terms of the offense, what they do, remains to be seen. But when you go into that head coaching search and you got all these guys that, hey, I once hit the spank bank next to Sean McVay. Hey, I once farted in the same room as Sean McVay. Hey, one time I shared an awkward groin stare with Sean McVay. You know what? That makes you qualified to be an NFL head coach. The Broncos actually found somebody that you could truly point to their resume and say, he's clearly deserving of an NFL head coaching opportunity. The key is for John Elway to allow Vic Fangio to be the coach and stay the fuck out of the way. That's the key. Heading into this offseason, this is a team with almost $50 million in salary cap space. In terms of your notable free agents, I don't know if you have a ton of them. Shaq Barrett, Shane Ray, Heuerman, Bradley Roby, Max Garcia, Jared Veldier, D'Amato Pecco. I can't believe Pecco was even still in the league, frankly. I was surprised when it came to that realization. But you look at Shane Ray, first-round pick from a few years ago. Certainly he's going to be gone. Bradley Roby, might he be retained? Perhaps. But not a ton of notable free agents here. I wouldn't be surprised to see this team invest a little bit on the free agency side. On the defensive side of the ball in particular, because they're going to be looking for quick results and quick turnaround with that Vic Fangio coached unit, and I understand that entirely. The good thing is they did get some talent to work with in this 2018 draft class, where you look at some of the previous drafts and you say 2014, the only guy left from that draft on the roster is Bradley Roby. 2015, you've got Max Garcia and Shane Ray. And who knows if any of those three will be brought back, or maybe it'll just be Roby, maybe Garcia. The 2016 draft brought you Gotsis and Justin Simmons, but you also had the notable bust of Paxton Lynch, and it's not like Gotsis and Simmons are big-time landscape changers. 2017, the only real contributor you have from that draft is Garrett Bowles. I mean, the recent draft history of the Broncos has not been good. Part of that you can blame on the team being built more via trade and free agency, which is true. It also can be blamed in part on picking at the bottom of the draft for a couple years in a row. That's also kind of true. That's also excuse-making, too. The Patriots pick at the bottom of the draft pretty much every year, and they're still consistent championship contenders. So picking at the bottom of the draft alone is not a good excuse for shitty drafts. It just isn't. But this 2018 draft looks full of promise for the Denver Broncos and would have me a little more excited combined with the Vic Fangio hire for 2019. You look at Bradley Chubb, stud. Cortland Sutton, future starter. Royce Freeman, we'll see how he fits in going forward. Isaac Edom, Josie Jewell, how they'll fit into the Fangio defense, especially Jewell, will be interesting. Deshaun Hamilton, I think, will get a lot more run in 2018. Then, like I mentioned, you got Phillip Lindsay, who was an undrafted rookie, who was as good as anybody on that Broncos roster in 2018, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Like, you got to feel good about where the Broncos could be heading. But this 2019 offseason will be really important for the Broncos because they've got Fangio, which you would think, if anything else, just based off of pure coaching, scheming, game planning, play calling, will have them as a top 10 defensive unit in 2019. If you add a little talent there, all the better. But you have to get better on the offensive side of the ball. And everybody knows this. The number one need for this team is a young quarterback. Just because you screwed up on Paxton Lynch doesn't give you the excuse to never draft a young quarterback again. That said, this isn't exactly the most exciting and appealing quarterback market out there in terms of draft classes. So the Broncos have to sit there and be like, do we really want to invest in a young quarterback in this draft, or do we take the chance of waiting until the next draft? What is it? Sometimes if you think, though, that, hey, this quarterback class is not good, we'll get the next one. Just because you're thinking of Fromm and Tua and maybe other guys in that draft class, that doesn't automatically mean that those guys are going to pan out. That doesn't mean that those guys aren't going to struggle in 2019. That doesn't mean that draft class is going to be better next year. So it's one of those things sometimes you have to evaluate the talent, find the right guy, and hope to God it works and do everything you can to make sure it works. For the Broncos, whether that be somebody like a Kyler Murray or somebody who would seem to fit a lot in Drew Lock, they must get a young quarterback in this draft and hope to God he develops. Because you can't set up Vic Fangio for failure like you did Vance Joseph for failure with this carousel of mediocre quarterbacks. You just can't. In terms of other areas of need on this team, I look at the tight end position. I feel like you could use a pretty big upgrade there, maybe some help on the interior of your offensive line. Defensively, I look at the linebacking core. I look at the secondary, especially inside linebacker. You're going to want a speed merchant inside there. Then at the corner position, sure, you've got Roby. If you re-sign him, you've got Chris Harris, but you obviously could use more because I don't feel like you fully accurately replaced Aqib Talib. I look at the Broncos team and I say they were what they were the past couple of years for a reason. That said, though, with Fangio coming in, you'll get more out of this defense. If you can get a little more out of this offense, the Broncos could be a playoff team in 2019. But you must find your quarterback of the future, period.